From fast food hell to vegan heaven, Chuck Carroll's nearly 300-pound weight loss is our gain. How he did it, next on the PETA Podcast. Welcome to the PETA Podcast. I'm Emil Guillermo, your host for this inside look at PETA, the largest animal rights organization in the world. On today's episode, the benefits of a vegan diet. For Chuck Carroll, it's a matter of life and death. In his late 20s, he realized he wouldn't see 30 unless he did something drastic, like lose 300 pounds. He did, but what sustained him was the vegan diet. No animals harmed in the creation of a meal. Now Carroll is the host of The Exam Room, the podcast of the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine, where he talks to the leading doctors and researchers about the vegan diet and how it eventually leads people to understand it's even better for the animals. Here's my conversation with Chuck Carroll, weight loss champion, on the PETA Podcast. The Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine, the Exam Room, is really such an information-packed show that you host. Tell me about PCRM's Exam Room podcast.
Oh, man, this thing is really all about trying to both appeal to people who have heard about plant-based eating now because it's become so buzzy to be vegan, which is phenomenal. So we want to attract the people who are curious about that, and then also appeal to those people who have been eating a vegan diet for a long time and still dropping some nutrition nuggets that they may not yet be familiar with either. And then we also do some live Q&As with a lot of experts in the field who are big believers in plant-based nutrition. And the cool thing about it is we get into the nitty-gritty of so many of these studies that get talked about on the news. You know, on the news, you only hear about it for 30 seconds or so. It's like, we want to spend 30 minutes on it and really dive into it and explain the ins and outs of things to people in lay terms that they can understand, and then go and be like, yeah, so I saw this on the news and here's what they were really talking about. And then hopefully get their friends, their family interested in it as well. So we can grow that vegan community to be as big and as healthy as we possibly can.
Yeah. And you know that just because people are vegan doesn't mean they're doing it right. So they can they can always benefit from some information. Like you were talking about people with questions on your most recent podcast. Can I eat too many berries? Right? Or can can I? And really, you shouldn't be able, except that it's kind of costly or can be pricey. but Neil Barnard, who's he's the doctor of PCRM. He was on with you, and we've had him on the PETA podcast. But one of the things that I mentioned is that just because you're a vegan doesn't mean you're going to do the right thing, because we all know of the Oreo vegans, right?
Oh yeah,
and that's kind of the tragedy. The unspoken tragedy of veganism, that there are people who are vegans, but they will say, well, it's okay to eat potato chips.
True.
In moderation, perhaps, but when it becomes your go-to and you're putting on extra pounds because of the expanded go-to, then you have to sort of like get back into the science and get back into what you guys do, to try to tell people where the nutrition is.
Right. And that's kind of the cool part. And we do kind of walk that line, right? So if it makes somebody feel more comfortable to go vegan and know that they can still have the occasional Oreo, then by all means eat the occasional Oreo, right? So the good is always going to outweigh the bad there. But we also want to make sure that this person is armed with as many facts as possible so they can make the best decision for themselves as possible. Yeah. Because as you know, I mean, there's so many layers to being vegan. It's obviously health in terms of the Exam Room is paramount. That's our number one. But you enter the animals and the environment into the equation as well. And that Oreo cookie suddenly looks a heck of a lot better than that chocolate chip cookie that's got a lot of dairy in it. Yeah. So you got to weigh the good with the bad, and we certainly don't want to scare anybody off. But yeah, there are definitely varying levels of being vegan in terms of a healthy diet. But I mean, really, if you look at any other diet out there, I'm sure you could say virtually the same thing.
Yeah, well, the other thing is when you give out advice about how to eat, all right, now you got to be careful because you don't want to shame anybody. Like, I guess I just shamed the Oreo eaters.
No.
Or, okay, maybe they were eating Hydrox cookies instead. I'm shaming the Hydrox cookie folks who think, oh, well, they'll never know. But the fact is when you dispense the information, we're not like, it's not like the church of veganism. It's not like a spirituality thing where, oh, you're a sinner and it's not a matter of shame. And that's where I think it's a good, where people who give out the information need to every now and then just make sure that, like you said, we're giving people information so they make their choice. There's no guilt involved, right?
That's absolutely right.
Never any guilt involved, but we always want to make sure that we're making the right choices, the right informed choice about what we want to do. But now this leads me to your story because you're Chuck Carroll, WLC, which is not MBA, not PhD. It's not CHLU or LUTCF. You can tell I know a little about the insurance business. You're not any of those. You're Chuck Carroll, WLC, which doesn't stand. The W doesn't stand for wrestling.
No,
it stands for weight loss champion.
Yeah,
and that's something because apparently you were given that name by you used to do some sports broadcasting, and an NFL player called you a weight loss champion. And tell me about your record. You lost how many pounds?
The record. Yeah, it does go back to sports. So all told now, it's been 11, almost 12 years, and I've lost 280 pounds and have been able to keep it off. And when the players in the locker room for the Washington football team got wind of my story, because they are also tuned into nutrition themselves, being at the top of the sports heap, they want to have every advantage possible. So there are actually a bunch of nutrition nerds. Anytime you're talking about an NFL locker room, you've got 60 plus individuals in there who love to talk about nutrition. It's not always about eating a whole bunch of fried chicken and pizza anymore for these guys. They really want to make sure that they're fueling their bodies good. So anyway, that's beside the point. So one day they catch wind of this, and I wind up doing a show with one of the players, a guy by the name of Adam Carricker, and he is the one who on the show gave me that nickname, the weight loss champion. And honestly, I was uncomfortable with it at first because I wasn't really a guy who bragged about these things. Even though I've been in media, I've always been kind of like the guy who stands in the corner and just observes the party as opposed to being out on the dance floor. But he was like, no, man, like you've really busted your hump to do this. Like, just own it, go with the title. And so I have. And
well, but look, you're being modest here. 275 pounds. I'm looking at you. You're the size of a Zoom box, which is where everyone should be. It's the size of equality. However, your stature is fairly modest. We're about the same, but you weighed 420 pounds.
Yeah.
How did that happen, Chuck?
Lots of trips through the drive-through.
Really? I mean, was it?
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I mean, it started really at a young age, and you learn those unhealthy eating habits. I came from Southern Virginia, matter of fact, Norfolk, Virginia, where PETA has Norfolk headquarters. Yeah. So that's my hometown, and had that traditional Southern diet. Lots of fried foods, and your vegetable was considered, baked beans in my case, a lot of the times. And if we were going to have any sort of greens, there was always a lot of fat in there too, ham hock and this and that. So that was like the healthiest I was eating. But because my brother and I were growing up largely with a single mother, a lot of times our dinners were trips through the drive-through. And before that, our grandma earlier in the day would have fed us, French fries that she did at the house with hamburgers and things like that. So it just was not the healthiest diet. And then as I got older and older and older, and my appetite grew and grew, by the time I was in high school, I was already above 300 pounds. And then it totally spiraled out of control by the time I got to my late teens and early 20s, where I was eating 10,000 calories a day. And quite literally, just like anybody can get hooked on cigarettes or drugs, I got hooked on Taco Bell. As crazy as that sounds, I could not go a single day without dropping my $20 at Taco Bell, man. I had to have it. Otherwise, I was freaking out.
God, and I remember the Taco Bell ads throughout the years, and I hope you had lost the weight and done what you had to do before they invented the fourth meal. Because when they invented the fourth meal, I said, "Oh man, this is going to hurt some people." The fourth meal. I mean, eating around the clock.
I was eating fourth meals long before that term was phrased, man. I had the fourth meal, the fifth meal. Man, I was just eating. I was just going, man.
Yeah. And so, all right. So at some point, you're in your late teens or your teens, and you're at 300 pounds. Mm-hmm. 300 is a lot for a teenager. Didn't someone say, Chuck, slow down, or Chuck, run a few more laps, or stop?
Yeah. I mean, there was always kind of that stigma that came with it. Some of my friends in high school called me Heavy C. So that came about pretty quickly. And then by the time I got into radio in my early 20s in the Washington, D.C. area, my big break came on a radio station, Big 100.3. It was a classic rock station. And so to be on that station, I thought I had to be Big Chuck. And so that's what I went by on air. So I kind of used that to justify it. Like I embraced it outwardly, while on the inside, I clearly wasn't feeling the best about myself, and definitely wasn't feeling the best physically. I mean, my health was already falling apart when I was in high school. Like, they put me on high blood pressure medication when I was like, I think, a sophomore. And that was it should have been a real wake-up call, but it took me another 10 years beyond that first prescription to really get my act together.
So you were 5'6", 420 pounds with a 66-inch waist, and you were just merrily going along, feeding this image of yourself. I don't mean to fat shame. It's more fact shame, not fat shame. But what changed? What had to happen for you to do something? When was the moment?
Yeah, a lot of people think that there's this one defining moment, and for me, it was a lot of things. So there's this show right now on ABC called A Million Little Things, right? And so it really was a million little things that led to one big change. And so it was the fact that my friends had organized an intervention for me when I was like 26. I was at my heaviest, and they had grown so concerned for me. They organized an intervention. Did not go over well whatsoever. I was not. No. It was like, I know that I have a problem. Who are you to tell me that I have a problem? How dare you guys come at me? I felt like I was under attack, even though I knew in my heart of hearts they were coming from a good place, and their concerns were more than valid. But nonetheless, I still cut a number of people out of my life for a few years because of that, because I was so hurt. The other thing was a flight across country where I could not fit into the seat literally had to walk up to the front of the plane, ask for a seatbelt extender, walk back to my seat just so we could take off, right? And so I call that the walk of shame. That may have been the most embarrassing moment of my life. But the biggest thing was also when I was in a relationship with a woman who begged me not to tell our friends, not to tell my family that we were dating. Just keep it on the down low, right? She didn't tell her family. She didn't tell her friends. And the only reason I can fathom that she did that was because she was ashamed to be with somebody who was that size, because I don't know, I guess she thought she would be ridiculed for it. So that was pretty painful. And so for a year and a half, I thought that was as good as it was going to get for me. And then eventually that relationship fizzled out. And then looking back on it, I was like, man, I deserved so much better than that. And so when you put all of that stuff together and all of these snide comments that you get from time to time from random people out in the world, it's like, there's your million little things. And then it's just like, I can't do this anymore. And frankly, I my health had also gotten to a point where I didn't think I was going to live but for another 4 or 5 years, and I wanted to see 30. So that all of that was the driving factor.
Yeah, you were just apparently you were just 27 at the time, and you decided to have weight loss surgery. Was it out of desperation?
Oh my gosh, yeah. I mean, there's no question about it. I mean, I'm not joking with you when I say I thought that I was going to be dead before 30, because I couldn't walk more than 10 or 15 feet without my chest beginning to tighten. Like, you always hear that analogy, it feels like an elephant is sitting on my chest. And that is a very accurate representation of what that feels like. You can't get air. And it literally feels like all of this pressure right there. And so you have to just stop and rest as you're sweating profusely, and then walk another 10 or 15 feet and repeat the process. It was scary. It was scary. And then knowing that I had this family history of heart disease, my grandfather died before I was even born from a series of heart attacks. And my other grandfather, he, also had a series of heart attacks. And my father at that point was beginning to have his own issues with his heart. So I was like, man, I'm just on the accelerated plan for all of that. And I still got some things in life that I want to do. So we got to rectify this, and we got to rectify it now.
So you had the weight loss surgery, and I guess how many pounds does that take off?
That took off about 250 over the course of the next 14 to 18 months, somewhere in that ballpark. So about a year and a half, all of that came off. But I was pretty dedicated to making sure that I was eating at that point what I thought was a healthy diet, and making sure that I was out there and just walking every day.
You're still eating meat and stuff, right?
I was at that point, because when you have this surgery, you're also given this meal plan by the doctors, which is very much meat heavy, because what they stress to you is protein, protein, protein. And at that point, I was still one of those people who believed, well, if you're not eating meat, you're not able to get any protein. So, and the doctors and the nutritionists there in this practice clearly believe the same thing. So every meal on there either had some form of meat in there, or cheese was another big thing, or a lot of times it was meat and cheese, and they stressed for you to drink a lot of milk as well. So that's what I thought was healthy at the time. Wasn't until a few years later that I really got my eyes opened.
You get the surgery, you get this big amount of weight, shoved aside, but you started to alter your diet. Still meat heavy, dairy heavy. So what was the eye opener that made you understand that what the doctors were telling you with the surgery wasn't exactly 100% correct?
It was actually, I'm working for a media company at the time, a pretty big national one. And I'm doing this interview with a professional wrestler by the name of Austin Aries. He was with WWE at the time, and he had just published this book about how he was able to rise to the top of that industry while eating a plant-based diet. So it was like his plant-powered journey from, I think he called it bingo halls to the main event of WrestleMania, or something to that effect. It's a great book. And so he's like, look, I know that you've lost a lot of weight. I know that you're a health guy, but you should really look at this plant-based diet. Here are some documentaries that you may want to check out. Here are some people that you're going to want to follow. And so I did. And it was after I watched that first documentary, it was just What the Health. And I was like, oh my God, we've been missing the point here. Like, why isn't this being talked about? Yeah. And because I also had a background at this point in journalism as a news reporter, I also knew to do my own fact checking, and everything that they were talking about in there really checked out. I went and I reviewed those studies, and I reviewed other studies on top of that. And then I looked at even what the critics were saying about that, and saying, well, no, this study refutes what you're saying. But then if you go and you look at the funding for a lot of those studies, where is it coming from? It's coming from Big Beef. It's coming from the Dairy Council. It's coming from the Egg Board. It's coming from all of those places that definitely have their own agenda. So you have to be wary of that. And then you just kind of balance it all out. And I'm like, yeah, well, what they said, that was spot on.
So you talked to this wrestler, and since then there have been other top-notch, world-class athletes who discovered whole food, plant-based, and still are at the top of their game. And so you adopt this diet, and I think you discovered that the surgery really was just a small part. That it wasn't until the whole food plant-based vegan diet that really things changed for you.
No question about it, because up until that point, I was still worried that the weight was going to come back. I always thought that the surgery was going to be a last ditch effort. And that way I could just go to my grave saying that I had tried everything. And even though, again, I was still eating a diet that was way lower in calories and fat at that point, and had not put a significant amount of the weight back on, I thought at one point it was all going to come off the rails like every other diet that I had ever been on before. And eventually I would be up to 420 again and then beyond, because there had been members of my family who had also had weight loss surgery who had put all of the weight back on, if not, a little bit more. So that is what I thought was eventually going to happen to me. And no, like with the plant-based diet, man, it was like, I don't have to worry about that anymore because it's nutrient dense, but it's not calorically dense. It's not dense in a lot of fat. So you can really eat until your heart's content and not have to worry about putting all that weight back on and having to shed the weight loss champion title that I fought so hard for.
And so what were your first meals and what were they like? Did you ever doubt?
Man, I did not know what I was doing. And this is why I really try hard not to shame anybody. Like we were talking about the Oreos, right? Because like so many people, the first thing I went to were, those Morningstar patties or Gardein or, things like that, that are heavily processed, but definitely 100% plant-based. So that's what I went to first. And then it was just a learning process as we went along. I've had so many doctors and nutritionists on the show say, hey, you may want to gradually ramp up your fiber, to avoid some discomfort. And let me tell you, heed that warning. If you're deciding to go plant-based, heed that warning. Do not go from 15 to 20 grams a day up to 40 grams a day, because your body's going to tell you, ho, not so fast.
So you're saying more fiber, less what?
Gradually ramp up the fiber, right? Yeah. So, just look for your plant-based foods that are a little bit lower on the fiber scale. A lot of those processed ones, that you can graduate into that whole food plant-based diet over time and ramp up that fiber over the, 2 or 3 weeks. And you're just going to be way more comfortable. Like for me, I got, so bloated. Beyond that though, like I was like, if this is how it's got to be, this is how it's got to be, because the rest of me felt so good that it was worth it. And then one day I woke up and magically all of that was gone. My body had adjusted. So just take your time, ramp it up, and you'll be good to go.
So Chuck, when did it strike you that you were also, by making this choice, you were making a choice for you, the human being Chuck Carroll, but you were also suddenly, accidentally, perhaps, but maybe not so accidentally, but you were becoming an animal rights activist by your diet?
I think by default, if you're eating a plant-based diet, I mean, that's exactly what you're doing. I mean, people come into veganism for 3 things, right? I call it the holy trinity of veganism. It's either nutrition, it's either the environment, or it's for animals. But inevitably, you learn about all 3. It's almost impossible not to. You can't have blinders on as you continue to do this research, because it's all kind of intertwined there. And so when you learn more and more and more about that, and it's like, holy God, that was really going on. And this is kind of what I was supporting blindly. Like it opens your eyes. And so then you feel good, not just about the fact that you're improving your own health, but you're not supporting, these atrocities that are happening.
Yeah, but you weren't thinking about the animals. I mean, this is my thing. My wife is with PETA, but I wasn't immediately a vegetarian when we first met. I gradually became one. But my whole motivation was, first, I am not the weight loss champion. I'm sort of like in my weight division, I lost 30 pounds, which I needed to lose, right? And I'm happy, and I've sort of yo-yoed that 30 until I became really committed to veganism, and I have been now for from vegetarian to veganism. But the point is, I was happy to be a selfish vegetarian, happy to be a vegetarian for me first. And I saw the improvement. And then I realized it wasn't until, a few years into it, then I realized, oh, there's this other reason to be vegan. There's this other reason not to eat animals. And that's for the darn animals themselves and, the factory farms and what it does to the environment, but also to end the suffering to animals. And so tell me about your newfound sensitivity, because I know that it kind of happens. And then as it happens more and more, tell me about your new sensitivity to animals.
I mean, it's just the darndest thing, and I honestly I don't like to use the term activist for myself personally, whether it's for nutrition or animals or anything else, because for somebody who's not yet in that community, I feel like sometimes that's a term that can be a little bit polarizing, stigmatizing. And again, my message is I want to embrace everybody and show them. So I don't want to scare anybody off, right? So while that may be factual, I just consider myself a guy who truly loves animals and is compassionate, right? So that's kind of what I tell people. And so I think for me, really, the connection was just when I started to see some of these images, and then I, looked at my dog who was asleep in the room, and I'm like, wait a minute. How can I love this guy and then not give a hoot about all these other animals over there? It just wasn't make sense. Let's throw, hamburgers and hot dogs on the grill. And oh, by the way, let's not forget to, take the dog out for a walk. Nah, man, something doesn't really compute there. And so it was just man, animals are animals. Animals have feelings. It's just you got to love, you got to support. And that's just kind of what it boiled down to, man, it kind of just opened up a spot in my heart, made me a little bit softer, man. I went from being this tough guy to, now I have a heart dag on it.
A tough guy at 5'6", 420. Now,
yeah, that's right, man.
Now
That's right.
Minus the 280. Now you were able to find your heart is what happened.
Yeah. In a lot of ways, not bigger physically, but definitely a bigger man overall.
Well, I have to say that when you start eating well and you start eating whole food, plant-based, no oil, vegan, and you start understanding what that means, you see that it's better for your health, of course, it's better for yourself. And then as you expand and say, well, who else is it better for? It's better for society. It's better for the animals. It's just a better way. And if more people adopted this, it would be the best thing. But you're still fighting out there in society a bunch of, a lot of misinformation, talking about, well, what actually does happen, when, you don't hear much about, well, you hear more about how animals suffer, but usually all that is kind of homogenized and, glossed over, and people don't think about that. And then you mentioned the studies which are usually financed by, the industry, the meat industries, the Dairy Council, et cetera, et cetera. But now you are in this position where you're giving out information. You're giving out the good information so that people can make the best choices for them.
No question about it. And again, going back to my news background, a lot of the information that I put out there, the majority of it is 100% independent. And that's important to me because I want for these stats, I want for these studies, I want for this information to be able to stand on its own 2 feet and be able to stand up to that criticism, So that's very important to me, that the information that's talked about on the Exam Room podcast is reputable and credible. And to me, integrity is everything. And so you're getting a lot of information, but it's information with integrity. So I'm just all about it, man. I definitely operate in the science realm. I love facts. I love proof. And that's what we aim to do here, man. That's definitely what we aim to do.
One thing I like when I have Neil on the PETA podcast and we talk about diet, he always impresses on me that most doctors have zero background in nutrition. most doctors know actually, Chuck, I know, I think I read where you went through a whole food plant-based certification. I went through the same one with Dr. Campbell, and it's amazing how it opens your eyes to how modern medicine works, and how ignorant doctors truly are when it comes to nutrition, unless they take the continuing ed that PCRM offers, or that they take courses that allows them to say, oh, you mean you can fight this disease with diet? You can fight. A lot of them don't know that.
Yeah, oh yeah, man. But it's also not taught in medical school. So like I don't necessarily blame the doctors, right? Because if it's not part of the curriculum, like if you did 0 credit hours when it comes to nutrition and diet, man. So it's like, how are they supposed to know? And so it's about having the conversations with them after the fact as the patient, just to open their eyes a little bit, can go kind of a long way. And I'll tell you, even before I went plant-based, I kind of learned like how little a lot of physicians know about nutrition. Is after I had reached my goal weight following the surgery, my surgeon looked right at me. Is like, now it's time to eat a hamburger. Right. And so that is a trigger food for somebody who had been so overweight, like super morbidly obese, right? Struggling with food addiction. And now you're just putting the drink back in the alcoholic's hand. And so I was like, why in the world would you give that advice? And of course, I never ate that hamburger, but I was like, just something wasn't right there. And then years later, when we're doing the Exam Room podcast, and I'm starting to learn about what it is you're talking about, and doctors not having this nutrition education, I'm like, that's why that was happening. And that's another big part of why we do the show, is because we want people to hear it and take it to their physicians. And we want for the physicians to hear it, to get this information and then take it to their patients. So everybody kind of learns together.
Well, yeah, it has to be that way, because the doctors are taught to do one thing and to approach medicine in one way. And like I said, there's a whole area of medicine. If you should include nutrition as medicine, but that whole area is not part of their background. So they don't dip into that bag of tricks and say, hey, look, maybe we can solve it with, solve diabetes by eating better, which sounds like the very basic thing. If you change your diet, you can change the path of diabetes, or you can change the path for so many other kinds of diseases that Dr. Barnard, Neil, his point, brought out in his books. So I think that's a big thing about your podcast, about the information. And tell me, when you meet people, or when people understand this, they have to be startled, right? Because they must feel like the doctors are, not dishonest, but they must wonder, why are they getting only half the information from their doctors, right?
Yeah, it's you get some pretty fun emails, a lot of emails filled with gratitude, and then you get the stories. But the cool thing is, it's like, yeah, some people are frustrated by it, and they're like, well, my doctor clearly, is a stupid doctor. And no, that's not the case. It's like, your doctor just wasn't taught about it. How are they supposed to know if it has never been mandatory education for them, right? So don't blame the doctor. Just take the message to the doctor. And other people are really cool, and they do kind of what it is you and I are talking about, as well, as taking that information to their physician and having them listen. And a lot of times it comes with these incredible health transformation stories. Somebody who goes in there and has high blood pressure and high cholesterol and diabetes and is on the verge of being diagnosed with heart disease. They have all of these chronic illnesses. And then suddenly they change their diet, they change their lifestyle, and they go into the doctor's office. The doctor's is like, wow.
Yeah, I don't know what happened.
What are you doing? And they tell them, it's like, well, keep it up, And so that's when the doctor learns about it, because they see the proof is in the plant-based pudding there.
So true. I mean, there's so many people, right? I'm sure people. This week, a friend of mine was telling me about her daughter. She was missing part of her pancreas, had to change her diet, went to a whole food plant-based diet. They thought that she would have to be on medicines for the rest of her life. She goes on a whole food plant-based no oil diet, no more drugs.
Yeah.
No need to do anything. She's totally. I don't say she's cured. She still has, half of a pancreas, but she is still much healthier than under the meds, and it's all because of food. And how many times have you heard of the diabetes turnaround or the heart disease turnaround, right?
For sure. All the time. And even the people who don't get those full reversals, maybe they've had diabetes for, 10, 20 years, and you can really only get so far with it is kind of my understanding. The improvement that they see, though, is so remarkable. So that the amount of medication that they need is so much less. The bottom line here is that I have heard of absolutely nobody who has not seen improvement on this. Every single person that I have heard of going on a whole food plant-based diet has seen marked improvements in so many areas. So there's so much upside that comes to this, so much.
And so there's the upside health-wise. And like I said, the motivation, everyone does things for selfish, is motivated by, for selfish gain. But look at the gain for all of society just by going vegan, just by going whole food, plant-based, no oil. It's good for society, and it's good for the environment, and it's good for the animals. I mean, that's
that holy trinity, man.
Yeah, that's the bottom line. Hey, look, Chuck, I really have enjoyed our conversation, and I hope that we can, carry on. It's probably easier to get you than Neil sometimes. So, maybe we can have you back on to talk about, what people can do in terms of diet and what are the things that would push people or make people proud to be whole food plant-based, make people proud to be vegan. And, and say, or maybe we can get into the vegans who are eating the wrong things. Like, for example, what's your take on the Beyond Burger or Impossible? I tend to veer toward Beyond, but they're all bad because they're all high in fat. And I broke one of my cardinal rules. I had 2 patties last night, which is that's like 18 grams of fat there. To combined, which is more fat than I usually have. I have no fat usually in my diet. You can't have those meats, those substitute meats, because they substitute everything about meat, including the fat that's in meat, with more oil, with oil and all the other stuff.
Well, here's the thing, right? So perfection, a lot of times it's just unattainable, right? So, if there's this picture of the perfect vegan, I think it's kind of a fantasy to be honest with you. We're all human. We all make mistakes, as it were. So nobody should be made to feel bad about eating a Beyond Burger.
I don't feel bad. No,
you shouldn't.
But
no.
I feel like, once I eat it, it's a reminder of why I only eat it every now and then, but when it was made available, people think, oh, wow, well, we'll just go back to eating burgers again. We'll have the good kind of burger. But then you realize, this also comes with all the bad things that burgers have, oil and fat. It doesn't hurt any animals, but it will hurt me. So
for sure,
I have to hold back, but we had a little party and we had some leftovers and, that we defrosted, and I thought, oh, well, I'm going to eat this today. And it just reminded me about why I save those Beyond Burgers for, every once in a while, every once in a while.
It is what it is. And you're okay. Like if you're the kind of person who can have that every once in a while and not kind of get hooked and have to go to it every single day, then enjoy your Beyond Burger every now and again. It's a treat.
You mentioned something, getting hooked, and you said you were hooked on Taco Bell because how much have you done on what the food companies do to hook you on their food? Because it's a lot of it is chemical. A lot of it is, we'll get people addicted to fat. We'll get people addicted to taste. Just share one thing about that, about what you've learned about that.
How well engineered and designed these foods are to be palate pleasers. I mean, you want to talk about mad scientists in a lab working on these crazy creations. That is everything that is on the menu at a fast food restaurant. That thing has been tailor-made to light up your brain to say, wow, this is the greatest thing ever. Feed me more, right? So when you learn that that's just not like some crazy conspiracy theory, like that is actually happening, that for me was really eye-opening. And I was like, well, no freaking wonder I couldn't stop going. Like I'm eating $20 worth of this stuff every single day. My body is just loving it. Of course I'm hooked on it, right? Yeah. So there's a reason for that. There's very much a reason why we get hooked on those kinds of things. That salt, that oil, that sugar. I mean, that will light up your brain like a Christmas tree.
Oh, yeah. Chuck Carroll is the host of The Exam Room, the podcast of the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine, where he talks to the leading doctors like Dr. Neil Barnard and other researchers about the vegan diet and how it eventually leads people to understand that it's even better for the animals. Check out the podcast on your favorite apps. And that's our show for today. Hey, thank you for listening. Don't forget to send a link of this show to your friends. Tell them you like the PETA podcast. You listen to it, then they should listen to. Hey, contact us at PETA@PETA.org. You can find me on Twitter at Emil Amok. That's EMILAMOK. Or see my vlog at amok.com, AMOK.com. Or see my work at ALDEF, the Asian American Legal Defense and Education Fund. That's at ALDEF, AALDEF.org/blog. Once again, thank you for listening. Check out all our episodes on your favorite podcast app or on Apple Podcasts, where you can rate and review the show. It helps get the word out about the issues you care about. Our music is provided by Carbon Works. Check them out on YouTube. And join us again next time for more insight into animal rights and the fight for a cruelty-free world on the PETA Podcast. I'm Emil Guillermo.